With the continuing expansion of interest in Web3, DeFi, and NFTs, we look to the bastions of regulation, the on and off ramps that we all use to convert between peso and our magical internet money. We are joined by Mark Goriseta, an award-winning legal professional who specializes in technology to lead a conversation about how centralized exchanges are approaching the world of Web3 in the Philippines. Mark is joined by Nichel Gaba of PDAX, Wei Zhou of Coins.ph, Kenneth Stern of Finance Philippines, and Farah Rodriguez of the Amber Group.
Okay, wow, full house for this panel. So I'll leave it up to this gentleman and lady if we would want to make this panel controversial or not. Okay, so, hi everyone, good afternoon. So it's a bit awkward for me and also a bit also comfortable since all of these are my friends and all of them as well are my clients in the law firm. So I'm Mark Goriseta. I'll be your moderator for this afternoon's panel for this session. So I guess since while awkward, and while I also can't assume that all of you would know the companies here, while I'm sure most do, and since we have a diverse group of attendees here, gentlemen and lady, can you tell us first very quickly about your company and what you do in your current role? So yeah, Farah.
Sure. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Farah Rodriguez from the Amber Group. I'm the country manager for the Philippines, and Amber Group is a Singapore-based digital wealth management company. So we specialize in market making, trading, offering yield products as enablers for exchanges, also for retail. So we launched our own platform available on the web and as an app. It's called WhaleFin. You can easily download typical buy, sell, trade, earn on your crypto using WhaleFin. Yeah.
Thank you, Farah. So Farah is from the Amber Group, and we're very happy to have Amber in this panel. Thank you, Ken.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Ken Stern. I'm the GM for Binance Philippines. So Binance is the world's largest crypto exchange, and we are also one of the largest Web3 ecosystems. We control about 70% of global liquidity and about 40% of daily trading volume. But we're much more than just the exchange. We have a launch pad, we have an academy, we have a coin marketplace, a number of other profitable businesses. So yeah, we are,
right,
Binance.
Who doesn't know Binance, right? Not too shabby for your intro, for your company. So thanks, Ken. Wei, welcome.
Hey everybody, my name is Wei Zhou. I'm the CEO for Coins.ph. We are the oldest crypto exchange here in the Philippines. Hopefully everybody bought their Bitcoin early with coins from back in the day. But the current management team, we took over the company earlier this year. And then hopefully we'll have a lot more exciting new products rolling out for all of our users here.
Thanks, Wei. Nichel from PDAX.
My name is Nichel. I'm founder and CEO of PDAX. So we're one of the licensed crypto exchanges locally. We also have a licensed securities brokerage, and we're also an EMI. We mainly cater to institutions, but also have a web and retail, web and mobile app.
Thank you, Nichel. So before I start my questions, can we give a round of applause to our panel, PDAX, Binance, Coins.ph, and Amber for being here. Some, if not like some of the biggest exchanges in the world. So, okay, I'll start with my first question. Probably not too controversial, but probably depending on how you will answer this question could lead to that. So, okay, let's start. Wei, Nichel, or anyone who would want to answer this, you all belong to centralized exchanges or exchanges that are governed by an entity. So compared to a decentralized exchange or exchanges, what do you think are the pros and cons of a centralized exchange? And in the long run, which exchange do you think would remain, or if possible, can these two exchanges continue to coexist and how? Wei, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, I think the entire crypto universe, I think, is actually pretty small right now when you
Right.
compare it to the entire sort of like fiat universe. So it's like when you pit like I think centralized businesses against decentralized businesses, it's like two little ponds fighting each other out in like this little
Right.
small pond. I think like what we have to sort of what we really have to do to really is to actually how to make our pond bigger. Because we're all just small fishes in a big pond, right? Even if Binance, they're still small fishes compared to like, they're pretty big, but they're like a sharks, in our pond. So I think the goal for us is actually how to make our pond bigger to grow into an ocean, and how do we let more water into the pond, right? The water in this case basically has money situated in the fiat world, and I think to do that, you need two things. I think one, you need basically teach how to users what is decentralization, right? Not fake decentralization. The true decentralization is basically, when you actually own your own, when you have custody of your own assets. I think that's something that everybody in this world is learning, like drinking from a fire hydrant this week. Like, what is true decentralization, right? I don't have to go too much detail about that. But in terms of where sort of the centralization plays in sort of the crypto exchange world, or is basically, I think it comes down to basically who's your counterparty. Like, who is this party that I am sending money into? And I think, over the last week, everybody's going to go and look at your term of use or your term of service. Like, who, when I click agree, who am I clicking with? Like, what entity am I clicking agree with? And what is the regulator behind, what is the regulation or the laws that govern that entity? Such that when shit hits the fan, there's like a recourse for me to go after them, right? To go after my money. I think that's that's sort of like, these are the sort of like, I would say more apt way. I don't think decentralization and centralization compete against each other because we're all trying to grow the entire ecosystem together.
Thanks, Wei. Ken, thoughts of like Binance on this matter? Centralized versus decentralized, which I'm sure you know where you belong.
I actually think that's a good point that it's not about the market share, but it's about the size of the pie itself and growing that. So, I think our perspective on decentralized exchanges for centralized exchanges, it's really preference also of the user. I think that it's important to, create some adoption for people to try crypto exchanges out for the first time. And centralized exchanges do offer that user experience that I think decentralized exchanges don't offer. There's that trust level, the security level. Binance, for example, has an insurance fund called SAFU, which you wouldn't get from an exchange that is over $1 billion at this point. There's a full KYC zero tolerance policy. So we do have a number of, I think, resources that help give trust to first-time users, and I think that's really going to be the growth of the pie that Wei just mentioned.
Right, I could see as you could, if you heard from Ken, it's like, of course, centralized exchanges, you want a KYC, a lot of compliance tools, right? And of course, compliance matters as well.
Correct.
So anything to add, Nichel or Farah?
Well, maybe I would say that I actually don't see a scenario where the two won't coexist, right? I do think that the pros and cons highlighted earlier were spot on. For centralized exchanges, the biggest pro obviously is that centralized entities are more nimble when it comes to user experience, and obviously the way we use crypto evolves over time, and it's not easy to think that decentralized exchanges can easily cope with that. But you also have to think about the risks of centralized exchanges, right? So the biggest risk in centralized exchanges is what materialized recently, and in every other exchange probably since Mt. Gox that under. So I guess we will eventually live in a world where we would have exchange wallets for when we need liquidity, when we want the seamless experience of using our crypto. But we will also have our own hardware wallets, maybe, or we would have our wallets tattooed on our backs. So I think we'll reach a point where both are
Correct.
coexisting.
So these two exchanges, centralized and decentralized, would really exist. Farah, you want to coexist? I mean, Farah, you want to add?
Yeah, very quickly, Attorney Mark. I agree with Nichel that these will coexist in the long term and in the future. I just wanted to add that based on my personal experience, having worked on decentralized projects before Amber Group, which is a centralized project, I've interviewed a number of Filipinos, different types of users, and it's really a preference, as Ken mentioned. Some people would really want to take full control of their digital assets, but there would also be people who would simply want a 24/7 reliable customer support.
Right.
That centralized exchanges, it's pretty standard to have, right? So at the end of the day, they will coexist, I believe, and that it's a matter of preference, depending on your level or appetite for risk. And I think ultimately the trust that you are willing to give the company or the project or the protocol.
Perfect. Thank you, Farah. Fantastic. So, wow. So with that perfect seg to my next question, and I just really want to get this out of the room already, right? This question. And I won't direct this question to anyone. This question, it's a voluntary basis. So I want to talk about this entire FTX saga, right? So anyone can answer this. It's up to you. So, but I guess like everyone here wants also to hear your thoughts. If you can share, like we hear a lot of stories on what has been happening, what is happening. We've been in a panel last week, Ken, Wei, and Nichel. Like we don't even know what's happening in the next 48 hours. Everything changed in 72 hours, 36 hours, 1 week, 5 days. I don't know. But like briefly, can you share with us, anyone, what you really think happened with FTX and how it can affect the Philippine market, if it will? That's one. And two, how it will affect the global market as a whole, or even the global crypto market. And I guess the last question there would be, how can we prevent this from happening again? Again, FTX, what's the story? What happened really there? How will this affect us? And how can we prevent this from happening again? It's up to you, whoever wants to answer.
I guess everyone wants to hear my thoughts on it.
Okay, wow.
So I'll just go ahead and
Binance
go
is answering first.
So no one's stepping up, so I'll... so yeah, unfortunately, I wasn't part of the deal itself, and I actually don't have any visibility on what happened, over the last, week or so. I do know that I think the market will always correct bad actors, and I think that generally we want, compliant professional organizations in this ecosystem, which will naturally happen through the market. How will this affect the world? You mentioned the crypto industry. It's obviously not good for anyone within the industry. It questions the integrity. It questions our stance. Even the good actors on the stage. So
Correct.
it's not a positive thing. And your last question was.
How do you prevent this
How
from
do we
happening?
So I think really this ties into regulation. Would be my personal opinion on this. I think that if there were more regulation, more laws, more legislation around cryptocurrency, maybe it's been a bit more transparent. This obviously won't be the last time this will ever happen in the industry, and you don't know if it's the last time this year this will happen. But I think more regulation is something that is needed because of things like this.
Thanks, Ken. Anyone?
Yeah, well, I think with regards to what happened to FTX, we have enough publicized information. It seems pretty clear that even FTX itself has admitted that there's been some operational probably misbehaviors here and there. So I do think that it's an unfortunate incident, right? A lot of people certainly lost a lot of money. Maybe upwards of $50 billion are still stuck in FTX. But I also think that in a way this is a necessary development, right? It's somewhat of a wake-up call, right? Regulators, I guess, for a long time have been happy to play in a well-defined world and kind of like try to shoo away the crypto industry. But now they really have to take some ownership here too, right? The reason that we're seeing large unregulated platforms grow so rapidly is because we don't have enough defined regulatory frameworks in the legitimate space to cater to the market. Now, will this happen again? I hope not. But what's fortunate here is that this is very preventable, right? Mankind has already figured out the solution to prevent these things from happening. You just look at the stock market, right? You don't see the Philippine Stock Exchange lending out assets because they're an exchange. They're supposed to facilitate transactions between a buyer and a seller. With brokers, you also don't see them take risk, right? They buy, they sell, end of story. Dealers, on the other hand, they take some risk, right? And we accept that. So I think that going forward, we're going to see a lot of the segregation of roles in traditional markets. applied to the crypto markets, where you could have a custodian, you could have a broker, a dealer, you could have exchanges, and everyone won't probably have the same jitters as we do now.
Right, so that's another topic altogether, right? The intersection of TradFi, traditional finance, and decentralized finance, and of course, as a result of what happened. Anyone else? Oh,
Yeah,
Wei?
yeah. I'll jump in here. I actually know Sam personally. Met him when I was at Binance back in December 2018. I actually know CZ quite well. He's my old boss. Worked for him for about 3+ years. So my take on this is actually, I think this is about a breach of trust. Like, it's basically like when you interact with somebody, it goes back to what I said, like when you send your money to somewhere, right, there is that counterparty that you send your money to, right? That's sort of at the heart of this business, right? How do you build trust? Well, I build trust with my bank because every time I put my money in, I can take my money out. Same thing, you build that relationship with your exchange, right? When I used Trust Wallet or when I used decentralized wallet like MetaMask for the first time, I had no idea where the money was, but I knew I could move it, and by the fact that I can move it anytime I want without anybody's approval, like that taught me that, hey, this is a trustless system, right? So at the end of the day, I think when we talk about trust, you can trust 3 things in crypto. You can trust the code, you can trust the law, or you can trust the man. And in this situation, there's a significant breach of trust between Sam and all of his users. Why? Because you got an MIT kid, smart, brainiac, whose parents are law professors from Stanford.
Really?
Who's backed by some of the most recognizable names and funds in the world. And people build trust that way, right? And guess what he did? He broached that trust, right? And I think that system kind of remains today. Is like, you got to trust something, right? Otherwise, you won't be able to get your asset out, right? And I think sort of like, and what we found this time is that the code he fucked with, right? He built a back door, and laws obviously didn't care about because he didn't care. Right, so at the end of the day, there's a breach of trust between Sam, the person, right, who runs this entire platform, and all of his users, right? And I think at the end of the day, we have to sort of come back to what I said earlier. It's sort of like, do you trust the code? Do you trust the law? Or do you trust the man? And I think that's what you really have to think about when you sort of like send your money out. So it comes down to that, yeah.
Correct. You want to add?
Yeah, quickly, attorney. My personal takeaway from all of this is, I think when one company in our industry collapses, it's barely a win for a competitor or anyone at all. When consumer confidence is shaken, every one of us would have to rebuild on that trust. So it's a call for higher standards to self-regulate. So on an internal level, just put higher standards. Also to be prudent with the funds of our customers. And lastly, to work together with regulators, with players, to make things better. It's in our best interest.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. So like, I think in several talks, we think that like while we have enjoyed, and we will still enjoy past years, we've enjoyed years of innovation, and I think that will continue. But personally, I think 2023 would be a year of regulation, right? And also a year wherein really to separate the legitimate players from the not so legitimate players. And with that, let's now go to our next question. You talked about trust and regulation, right? So my next question is, to any of you, probably we can start with Wei or Ken. How much regulation is too much regulation? Or conversely, how much regulation is too little regulation? So this is specifically to draw from your global and or local experience in being able to secure regulatory approval and in working with the regulators towards having compliant platforms and products. So what's the trend globally and in Southeast Asia or in the Philippines and that you've experienced firsthand? And if the Philippine regulators are here now or can hear you, what's in your wish list? So what's too much, what's too little regulation, and what's in your wish list?
Yeah, I'll jump on this one. I think from a regulation perspective, there's dumb regulation, there's no regulation, and there's smart regulation. I mean, it's pretty much, right? And then in terms of smart regulation, well, people have had crypto exchanges and have had cryptocurrency ownership for the last, it's been 10 years or 15 years. Like, it's been 2008, 2009 since Bitcoin's been founded, right? So the digital asset cryptocurrency has been around for a long time, right? And the lawmakers and the regulators have, to say that, oh, they're just learning about this industry is bullshit, right? They've had plenty of time to learn about this industry, right? So like coming back to sort of what I said earlier, is that I think from a regulation perspective, there's key things you have to care about, right? The original points, the talking points for regulation is actually custody, right? You are a custodian of user assets, right? That is the most important thing for digital asset businesses. You are a custodian of user assets. What does the law say about custody, right? What does the law say about anti-money laundering, right? Those are the fundamental building blocks of the financial asset class, right? If you want to run a regulated business, those are the two key things that people care about from a regulatory perspective. I think from what we've seen from the FTX scenario is, hey, like Nichel said, maybe we got to bring in some of these like stock exchange or equity exchange, stock exchange practices on fair dealing, right? I think that's something that we need to start caring about. You can't trade against your customers, right? That's pretty straightforward, right? And the third point, whereas I think some regulators have cared too much about the differences between utility token and security token. I mean, that discussion has been in place since the beginning of tokens, since Ethereum started doing smart contracts. Hey, guess what? If you don't even have custody right, and you don't have like fair practices right, like what's a utility and what's a security, it doesn't really matter that much, right? These are startups issuing tokens. They're startup tokens. You can call them whatever you want, right? Like you're investing in a startup. It's just that instead of equity, it's tokens, right? If it works out, you can make a lot of money. If it doesn't, it go to zero. Tell people that, right? Educate people on the risks involved in that, right? Beyond that, you know what? Everybody can put in $50,000, right? It's just sort of like put a number on it. Cap people's losses or something like that, right? So I think that in my mind is smart regulation. Focus on the key things and then keep it consistent, and then you modify over time, right? So I think from a regulatory perspective, what we've seen in the U.S. is actually a lack of clarity has actually caused a lot of this. Because I think the people that actually lost the most money on FTX are actually American institutions, American LPs, and American funds.
Right, very interesting. So like, I guess from that, my own takeaway is that really differentiate or have clarity and the really laws on custody. Of course, have a more robust AML standards or compliance. And I guess third, I like that point, Wei, on really not dwell whether, let's say, a token is a security or an investment contract, right? And like allow, let's say, startups to do their thing, but probably put a cap. Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense, even as a securities lawyer like me. Yeah, Nichel?
Yeah, so I guess my short answer to this is that if we see the industry destroy $50 billion in value twice in 1 year, there's definitely room for somebody to step in. Now, the long answer is that I'm sure it's very difficult to balance a lot of interests here, right? You have to consider the growth of the industry on the one hand, and also protecting consumers on the other. Now, that is a very hard calculus to make, and probably there are better minds out there to figure out what the happy compromise is. But for me, one thing is quite clear. There's too much regulation if there's not enough enforcement to align with the amount of regulation, right? Like if we have very minimal regulation, but it's strictly enforced, and everyone's playing by the rules, then perfect, right? No matter how much regulation is out there. But I think right now we're reaching a point globally where there are existing securities laws, there are existing laws against fraud and laws to protect us against bad actors, but they're just not being effectively enforced. And what tends to happen is we are actually penalizing regulated players, because regulated players will always try and follow rules, but hey, you know what? You're operating in the same market, but it just so happens you're not registered, you don't have to comply, right? So there's too much regulation if enforcement is not there, right? Or if enforcement is lacking. They have to go together.
Yeah, I think like Nichel has been clear about that really, or has been championing that, like, it's really enforcement of existing regulations. It's also for the benefit of everyone, I think, as mentioned by Wei as well and Nichel, here in the Philippines, while their exchanges are regulated by the central bank, right? Of course, our SEC has come out with their draft rules, which is remains to be drafts, right? But I like the points of way that not really dwell on investment contract, not really like put everything under the Huawei test, right? And like really put a cap so that investor protection is still there for certain investments, right? Ken, you want to add to that?
Sure. So when it comes to regulation, our stance is always that we welcome regulation. We're actually one of the most regulated exchanges in the entire world. We have G7 licenses in Spain, France, Italy, to name a few. So I think when you talk about too much regulation, I think you're talking about halting innovation and not allowing companies to continue to push the boundaries. But too little would create gray areas and confusion, and would also halt innovation as well. So I think it is important to be regulated, but I think an understanding of what that regulation means is equally important. The way I think about it is very simply, when cars were invented, you didn't apply the laws of horses to cars. It's a new technology, so you need to understand what this new technology can bring to people and how dangerous or how effective it can be. The wish list, I don't think anyone mentioned it, but I do wish that they would actually ask local exchanges and global exchanges for advice as they crafted these laws. And I think that would be one thing that we can work with the central bank in the Philippines with, but also we've done this in a number of jurisdictions around the world. We are in a fortunate position that we are very regulated, and we'd love to offer some of that advice to the Philippine market.
Right. I think also, Ken, that for the benefit of everyone, Binance and we have actually started that conversation even since the Senate has come out with this draft Digital Asset Act, right, of 2022. The goal of that is supposedly define what a digital asset is and supposedly be able to consolidate, definitions from the BSP and the SEC or globally. Farah, before you answer, I just wanted to, I think since Ken already started the conversation on this, as mentioned, a lot of vulnerabilities, rug pulls, right? So for your respective institutions, so you can answer this again, Ken. What steps are you doing to, really promote market integrity and investor protection? So, what programs, steps within your respective institutions? You want to start, Farah?
Yeah, I can start. Well, for us at Amber Group and Whalefin, our platform, even before everything, all of the collapses, we have been actively working on getting a full financial audit for our group, the entire group. Also, in the spirit of transparency, being able to publish this, so also our proof of reserve and how exactly we are managing the funds of our customers.
Transparency, right.
Correct. Also on cybersecurity, we've always been transparent about sharing that we spend a quarter of our operations budget on cybersecurity.
Wow.
Because we know that working with institutions and also our end customers, it's very important to secure and put an extra layer of protection. Those are also insured. So all of our wallets have insurances.
Interesting. Correct.
These are just some of the steps that we're making. It's very important for us at Amber to comply in every market that we try to go into. We have yet to secure a license in the Philippines, but our experience in Asia tells us that each market has its own approach. And we respect that. We want to comply with that. So we want to work with regulators and help out on how we can push this forward faster.
Nice. Wei, any programs in coins.ph that you want to share with us regarding market protection, market integrity, investor protection that you want to promote?
I think there's how do I want to talk about this? It's a little bit, I wouldn't say tricky to talk about this, but actually I think it's more important to say we follow the rules and the guidelines of the BSP as laid out by their virtual asset service provider.
Right.
We're a license holder in this country, and we follow the rules of this country. Right? It's pretty straightforward. Right?
And we make sure to follow.
Yeah, we have regular audits from the BSP. As soon as the FTX event happened, the BSP reached out to us and asked us, a lot of questions about what our exposures are, what our issues are, what are we doing to deal with it. I mean, it's what happens when you run a regulated business, right? You have regulators, you have regulatory oversight in your business. And what happens when I don't do that? I will go to jail. So it's a pretty black and white sort of question and answer. So I don't need to go say, hey, I'm doing this or I'm doing that, and be like, I follow the rules. Pretty easy answer.
Right, Nichel, you want to add?
I think this is one area that we really invested a lot of effort into, in that today PDAX pretty much operates like a bank,
Correct.
and in some respects that it doesn't always make for the best user experience, but we operate to a level that is comparable to a bank. Our risk officer is from a bank, compliance officer is from a bank. Our
Correct.
operations managers are also all from banks. I'm from a bank. Our treasury risk officer is also from a bank. Now, granted, banks don't offer the best user experience, but at least this level of I guess attention to best practices in
Right.
finance
And structure.
will probably serve the best interest of the crypto market.
Perfect. Wow, really fascinating. For my last question for everyone, since we have 5 minutes, I guess. So fitting to our theme here, Web3 Festival. So like, what do you see your institution's role in Web3, NFTs, and in building the metaverse in the short term and in the long term? And also connected to that, how do we all stay safe in Web3? So what's your role in Web3, the metaverse, NFTs, and how do we stay safe to end? Briefly, Nichel?
Well, as a centralized exchange, I think our most immediate role is quite clear. We don't teleport into the metaverse or into Web3 applications. We go through exchanges, right? So our job in this ecosystem is to make that transit as seamless and as safe as possible. But we also, I think, serve a larger role, and that is that a lot of Web3 projects require more of an ecosystem in order to become viable,
Right.
It's no longer like a Web2 product where you can, achieve your MVP, your minimum viable product, and then you go to market, and then boom, round of applause. In Web3, the job is more difficult. You need to figure out what regulatory frameworks apply to you. You need community engagement. You need token support. You need token liquidity. And I think centralized exchanges probably are in the best place to do that too. So PDAX, while we operate the exchange, we also have a separate subsidiary that's a venture arm, Archipelago Labs,
Right.
that will help bring this ecosystem support to Web3 projects.
Thank you, Nichel. Wei?
Yeah, so for coins, like I said earlier, we have some really exciting products coming out for everyone. We want to be the gateway into Web3, right? Web3 sounds big, but all it is basically you're accessing a decentralized application. And then what do you need to access a decentralized application? You need a decentralized wallet, right? And you need to have some funds in that wallet, right? So what we've have built on Coins is that if you go to the Coins Android app today, there's a Coins Arcade. We're testing it out right now with one game. I mean, if you're a game developer in the Philippines and then you're building Web3 games, come and find me. Also, I'm speaking here. We want to put your game into our Coins Arcade, right? That is a decentralized, that is a game center where you can actually, from a user's perspective, it's a free-to-play game that you can play no different than sort of like you can play any other Web2 games. So I think that's something that we want to roll out. Going back to sort of how to stay safe, I think it's a combination of basically you have to learn how to how money moves, how assets move in this world. What are the protocols that you use when you go on a decentralized platform, right? And then what happens when you put money in and out of a centralized platform? I think it's and don't put that much asset if you don't know what to do, and don't invest more than you can afford to lose. So
Right.
those are
so
some
still
of
a lot of work with respect to education and literacy.
Correct.
Right. Perfect. Farah, your
Yeah.
thoughts?
Well, for us at Amber Group, we're business as usual. We'll keep doing what we do best, which is, of course, market making, providing yield products for our institutional clients. Also for our retailers, our mobile app and platform Whalefin is up and running. In the long term, we are moving towards becoming an enabler. So if you're a
Enabler.
Web3 project owner, an exchange in needing of wallet services or APIs to do all of these, Amber Group is here to support you there.
Perfect. Thank you. And last words from our friend from Binance, Ken? what are the plans of Binance?
Yeah, I think there's
this
three main things we want to focus on. Number one, compliance. Number two, remittances in the Philippines. And number three, education. So in compliance, I think we've built one of the world's largest compliance teams. We have over 500 people globally, many from FBI or Europol working on our team to help against cybercrimes rather. One thing that we've done in the Philippines is we partnered with the CICC, Cybercrime Investigation Committee, under the DICT, to actually train local law enforcement on cybercrimes. We had a 2-day seminar about a month ago where we had over 100 law enforcement agents from Philippine National Police, DOJ, NBI, and we actually brought in our international resources to train local law enforcement on how to solve cyber crimes. Remittances, I think, is probably the best use case for crypto use in the Philippines. My mom being an OFW, I've seen firsthand the struggles of transferring money globally. And I think as more OFWs start to understand the power of remittances through cryptocurrency and use of stable coins and how much money and time they will save in fees and convenience, I think that's going to be a huge opportunity to get crypto seen in the Philippines to be one of the largest in the world. Education is something that we've focused on significantly in the last few months. So we've partnered with universities like the Philippines, FEU, Enderun, a number of other institutions, and we really want to educate from the university level. We're offering scholarships, grants, free blockchain courses, so we really want to help the next generation of Web3 developers in the country, and we think that the Philippines is really one of the best markets to work in, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
Thank you, Ken. So on that note, can we give again another round of applause to our speakers and panelists here? Farah Rodriguez from Amber, of course, Ken from Binance, Wei from Coins.ph, and Nichel Gaba from PDAX. I'm Mark Coriseta. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you for being with us, Mark Coriseta, Nichel Gaba, Wei Zhou, Kenneth Stern, and Farah Rodriguez. And now for our last panel discussion for the day, we are going to talk about empowering Filipinos through fintech. To close out day one of the Philippine Web3 Festival, we invite Katrina Chan of Philippine Startup Week to host a conversation on how fintech is empowering Filipinos. We'd like to invite Crypto PhOG Yang Zhang of Sendit and Bing Zhuo of Huawei.
All right. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Hope everyone's having a great Web3 festival so far. So today we're going to be talking about empowering Filipinos through fintech. And I'm actually quite surprised, pleasantly surprised to see that we have an all-female blockbuster panel here that's going to be talking about, fintech and ecosystem building, community building, and impact again in the fintech ecosystem, especially with Web3 and crypto, right? So, yeah, I guess today all of you guys are gonna get to find out from our panel today how fintechs and the tech ecosystem, right, is adapting to the fast-paced world of crypto and how they're kind of addressing the needs of Filipino Web3 natives, as I'm assuming many of the people in this audience are, right? And I'm joined here today by Yang and Maria, but before I ask them to introduce themselves, I'm Kat Chan. I'm not cool enough to be a Web3 person, so maybe most of you don't know me, but if you do, it's probably because I work with IdeaSpace, which is one of the largest tech accelerators here in the Philippines, as well as Kubo. So we work with the government and also organize the Philippine Startup Week, which is also happening this week. And I guess I've worked with about, 700 or so startups now in the ecosystem, working in the Web 2 space initially, since we've been at this for around 10 years, but now really excited to see a lot of new faces in the Web 3 ecosystem. And I think many of you will know that fintech is probably the largest sort of space or vertical in our startup ecosystem. All of our unicorns are in the fintech space, I would say. Many of the the Web3 companies are the largest growing also, whether it's in metaverse, fintech, and many others. And yeah, and today, like again, I'm joined by these lovely ladies, and we're going to be having about half an hour to discuss the impact and where we're seeing it going, right? So, okay, so let me actually kick this off and ask each of you, ladies, to, maybe just do a quick kind of self-introduction, right? Like, so who you are, what you guys are up to, or what you ladies are up to, rather, and yeah, like I guess how describe sort of like what you're doing with respect to this topic, right? So, how your companies and your work is sort of involved in bridging this sort of fintech kind of crypto space. So, yeah, maybe I'll start the end of the panel. So, Yang Yang.
Sure. Hi, I'm Yang Yang. I came to the Philippines in 2017 to be one of the co-founders of PDAX, which is still, I think, one of the largest order book exchanges here. It was impossible when you were involved in Web3 all the way back in 2017, 2018 to not fall in love with the enthusiasm in the space at the time. So I chose to stay after I left PDAX in 2019. I now head new products, of course, a little bit bordering on Web3, a little bit bordering on open banking. I head new products at Sendit, which is a regional payments and banking infrastructure company. And I also lead regional expansion, which is why I'm still here in the Philippines, my now adopted home.
Awesome. And yeah, Bing.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bing. I work for Huawei International. I'm sure you guys have heard of this company. So I'm based in Singapore for the part of the region ecosystem and partner team. Mainly, recently we focus on fintech industry, especially for the hottest topic, the crypto, metaverse, and everything. But we love to work with local companies to explore this area. So that's the background of we've been here. Welcome, thank you for seeing us here.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, thank you, Yang Yang and Bing. I guess, my first question really is, why is it important, right? Like, why is it important for, I guess both of you sort of represent traditional, or not necessarily traditional, but more established kind of fintechs, right? So why is it important to for the traditional systems of fintech to sort of embrace the new, right? The Web3, the crypto. And yeah, you guys, ladies, care to discuss a bit about that?
Yeah, I think it's quite important because it's very new stuff for all of us. Especially even myself, we work in the traditional fintech industry. But recently, even our company, we invest a lot of resources into this industry. We have a dedicated local team for crypto, related business, and especially in APAC region, we have around 200 people for fintech industry, mainly just for business development. So I think that's one of the signs to show that we think this is very important, and we like to invest, and we like to connect with local people, companies, startups, developers. However, in this industry, we like to know you, and we want to learn as well, because this is a new, area for us as well.
So for Huawei, definitely an area of priority. So I suppose, Bing is looking to connect with you if you're a fintech company. But I guess for you, Yang Yang, this is perhaps nothing as new. You were with PDAX before this, right? Before Zendit. So what are your thoughts on, why it's important for traditional fintech to kind of embrace the Web3 side of things?
So a couple months ago, I remember I went to my parents' house in the States, and I went through some old cabinets, and I pulled out all of my old flared and bell-bottom jeans because they're fashionable again. And I feel like that's kind of an analogy for everything, right? The more things change, the more they stay the same. Ultimately, if we think about fintech, payments, digital payments, was super new and disruptive and frowned upon by banks just a decade, 5 years ago. I think now that the pandemic has happened and there's been a ton of adoption of digital payments, we forget how recently that happened. And so I think that for even, let's say, traditional fintechs, which is a word that would be unthinkable a decade ago, for any fintech, I think our responsibility is to show the same open-mindedness our partners showed us when we first started to enter. And so the same way that banks tried to shut down payments companies 5, 10 years ago, we are now responsible for not closing our doors to Web3 companies. So I think a big part of what Sendit does, I mean, in Indonesia, we were one of the first to support the P2P lending industry. Here in the Philippines, we were the first to champion something like direct debit, which is the ability to pull directly from bank accounts, something that didn't exist before. And to us, crypto, or at least the responsible Web3 players, are the same ones that are going to be the unicorns of the future. And so it's really up to us to figure out how to work with them compliantly, to be able to approach the regulators together. I think that a big part of having had experience on the other side of the curtain, so to speak, is that at least when I'm approaching regulators on the more traditional side of things, I'm able to say, hey, we're not all the lawless wild, wild west, right? I think that a lot of us actually want to see regulation enter this space. A lot of us know that without those frameworks, it's actually impossible to see Web3 scale responsibly in the future. And I think that for us, it's important, no matter what industry we're in, to think about how Web3 will touch our lives and also about how we can continue to support responsible innovation in that new ecosystem.
No, that's really interesting to think of it that way. I guess like we're the old guard now in some ways, right? And welcoming the new guys. But I think generally, maybe the elephant in the room, right, when everybody thinks about crypto, especially these days, is the crypto winter and the FTX stuff, I guess, more recently, right? But I think what you said, Yang, really is important to touch on, in that it is important to kind of step back and think about, in the startup world, we like to talk about falling in love with the problem, right? Like, why are we doing this, and what is the problem exactly that we're trying to solve, and whether whatever phase of web you're in, right? Like, I think a lot of these sort of fundamental things remain the same, right? And as we think about empowering Filipinos, and not just Filipinos, but consumers and people through fintech, right? Like, I suppose, yeah, like I am curious to hear about what's the problem that you've fallen in love with, and how you see Web3 and crypto as sort of being part of that solution. Like outside of maybe the short-term friction that we're encountering, right? Like, how do you see crypto impacting or improving the financial system, or what problems does it really solve? Why is it important, right? Yeah, any thoughts to share on that?
I can sort of share some of the experience that I'm encountering with those companies. I'm sort of in charge of our ecosystem partners for APAC region, and we have worked with those companies for 7 countries in APAC. And I found out, especially not only Filipinos, but also Singapore, Malaysia, and Indonesia, there are lots of companies, they're looking to invest in some more new areas. And I can see that in this industry, even in very little, short time, the company profit can be increased, rapidly. I know that because when we, freshly recruit some partners, and within a few months, 3 or 6 months, and the profit and the cloud, the services they're using can, improve like 50% plus.
50%.
Yeah, so I can sort of see this is, very good business, so to speak. So, and especially where are they? Singapore, Hong Kong, and Filipino, and also Malaysia, Indonesia. And also, another science I can share with you guys is that when we work with those companies, they are easy to deal with. They just, startups and, code writers, very easy to deal with. And they only, talk about technical stuffs and not commercial. So that's another reason that I'm showing that I love to work with those people. Yeah, I think that's something I like to share.
And this is something you've been seeing everywhere, it seems like. Amazing.
Yes.
And yeah, how about you, Yang? What's your why, right? Like, what's the problem that you think you're solving, and what role do you see Web3 playing in that at the end of the day?
I think that a lot of people ask me this question, mostly in the context of, you're not Filipino. Why are you still here, 5, 6 years later? What brought you to the Philippines in the first place? And actually, that was one of my favorite expressions. Like, as a founder, you have to fall in love with a problem. You know, you can never be egotistical enough to think my first idea is the right solution to that problem. You have to continuously force yourself to reinvent so that you can come up with more and more innovative solutions to that same problem. And I think that fundamentally, the same problem that brought me here is the same problem I've now stayed through 2 companies to solve. And it's really about accessibility. I think that a lot of times there are many ways that we can attack the same issue, right? But fundamentally, it's very difficult for Filipinos to access the same types of financial products, the same types of responsible credit, the same types of even mechanisms for saving that a lot of other people can in other parts of the world. And I think that that issue boils down to 3 kind of symptoms that we can tackle together. The first is distribution. The second is trust. And the third is infrastructure to empower both of the other 2. And so if you think about it, there are both, now I can say, I guess, traditional, sort of in the banking, payments, traditional space, but also Web3 ways of tackling all 3 of those dimensions. Obviously, on the side of trust, you can start to digitize KYC through traditional means, figure out ways through traditional databases that we can verify identities better, but we can also do that in one fell swoop with a great blockchain solution. The second is distribution. When you think about distribution, there is a way in the traditional space to work with partners and try to open their eyes to what innovation can do, not only for cutting edge businesses, but even for their own legacy businesses, the analog world, so to speak. And that's, you know, something we can do traditionally, but also in the Web3 space, globally all at once, because anything that rolls out in the Web3 ecosystem rolls out to everyone all at the same time. And then finally, this idea of being able to build infrastructure that empowers the other 2. I think there's something that, you know, in the traditional space needs to happen, right? On the fiat rails, we do spend most of our time trying to work with partners really on the very base layer of their own infrastructure, co-building solutions so they can start to offer a better platform for Web 2 and Web 3 companies to interact with them. But on the blockchain side, we can do that again so much faster because the technology is inherently more democratic by the fact that, you know, anyone who can learn Solidity can write a smart contract. And so I think that for me, in order to really build a strong foundation for Web3 innovation, to allow all of this really rapid innovation to happen, both sides have to move in parallel. And so I think, to me, I've had the good fortune of seeing both sides of that problem, but it's really all the same. I think that, you know, fundamentally, what I came here to do is really just to make sure that there's more accessibility. I think today I'm looking at the Web 2 space and how to empower Web 3. And I hope that there are players here that are continue to take advantage of that.
I really love that sentiment, you know, this idea of accessibility, right? Again, of problem solving. I know many people in this community are working at, you know, different solutions that are addressing that. And again, using perhaps different tools, right? And I think one very powerful aspect of Web3 also is this sense of community, right? And like how things are being built, the speed at which it's being built also. And again, the fusion perhaps of different tools, use cases, traditional and kind of new companies kind of working together, right? And kind of developing these solutions to these very hairy problems still, like I have to say. And yeah, I guess on that note, I guess my next question is, are there ways maybe that you see that crypto and Web3 are actually helping the people of the Philippines right now? Like, you know, whether it's obvious to them or it's something that's more hidden, perhaps. I don't know, like, I would love to hear from both of you on, yeah, like, how is this whole Web3 crypto stuff actually affecting people already, like today?
I think as for the research we've done, there are around 150 fintech companies in Philippines, and nearly half of them are our customers. And if we talk about the traditional fintech company and the new ones, we found out a lot of, especially the people in this industry, they're looking to the solution. And the new technology and Web3 company and all that provided a pathway for them to think through. Just for example, like, ChanUp is one of our companies, one of our customers. They're in Singapore. And the business they do, not only just for that region, but they looking to expand the business, in Philippines as well. And I think this is new industry and provided those investors for new thing to think about and maybe wanted to expand the business. Yeah.
How about you, Yang Yang? Is there a surprising one maybe that people don't know about in terms of how Web3 is affecting Philippine fintech or fintech right now?
So I will not take the low-hanging fruit, which is crypto-based remittance, although I think that's a big one. I know that a lot of the crypto players here, I think PDAX, Coins.ph actually participate in these massive global crypto-based remittance networks, and I think that that's doing a lot of good. I think the one that I wanted to focus on was really the visibility of the startup scene here. I think that on the back of, I think just that play to earn, now it's a little bit of a dirty word, but still on the back of that kind of movement over the last year, there's been a lot of visibility for the Philippine startup scene. I think that with this sort of change in management happening across a lot of the sort of big crypto players here as well, there's a lot of just global visibility to a particular tech industry in the Philippines that we really haven't seen before. I think that it's nice to see global investors, global VCs start to take the Philippines more seriously.
Absolutely.
I think we get pinged every day by one of our investors, for example, asking, hey, do you know this Philippine startup? They're in the Web3 space. Like, do you work with them? And I think that it's really, really nice to see that happen. I think a lot of people don't credit the crypto industry with that because a lot of times they focus on, again, this FTX debacle or, the play to earn stuff. And I think that there are a lot of really valid impactful use cases that are being built, right here.
I mean, definitely on both points, I totally agree. Like, first of all, like remittances, right? Like, not super sexy, and I think that's kind of a theme in a lot of these things. Like a lot of change is being built on these things that maybe don't make the headlines, but at the same time make such a difference in so many people's lives, right? And I totally agree with you in terms of the lack of visibility, but the increasing interest. I mean, so many people flew in here for this Web3 festival. So, hey guys, especially if you're a first-time visitor to the Philippines, like, shout out to you. Thank you for coming. And yeah, in Philippine Startup Week, check that out as well. But no, but I super agree. Like, in terms of just the volume of kind of like, I don't know, telegrams I'm getting, right? Just asking about what's going on with XYZ company and like the interest from investors. There's definitely a lot of momentum being built there. And I think a lot of it does have to do with the fact that, hey, there's traction, right? That's being established in these kind of lesser known, unsexier spaces, right? But that again, if it's a problem in a market like the Philippines, it's probably also an issue or a problem that can be solved in so many other places, right? And I think that's pretty exciting. So, so I guess on that note, and I was flagged that we probably have I have time for maybe one or two last questions. So maybe I'll kind of want to ask for both of your sort of final thoughts in terms of our topic again, which is empowering Filipinos through fintech. And I guess two things, right? Especially in this environment that we're in now, right? Like, so if you guys had a crystal ball, I suppose, right? How do you see or what do you think the importance of crypto in fintech will be, I suppose, in the next 5 years or so, like in the medium term, 3 to 5 years, right? Maybe hard to look much farther out than that. So that's kind of part one of the question. And then part two of the question is, what role do you see yourself playing in it? And maybe most importantly, right, like for the masses, for the average Filipino, for the people maybe watching online that aren't joining us here in this room, right? Like, what's sort of your, I don't want to say advice, but like, how do you see them kind of benefiting from or taking advantage of what's going on in fintech, in Web3, and all these developments, right? So again, it's kind of complex question, but yeah, 3 parts. Where do you kind of see it going? What role do you think you'll be playing in it? And then your advice to the layman masses, right, about how they should be participating in Web3 fintech space.
I think I'm not too sure where it's heading to, and as I don't know whether anyone can know that is heading to anywhere, or it's unclear just for me. But I think for myself, the role I'm playing, I can totally share with you, is that I will recruit more partners to build up a strong ecosystem and for this industry, and that's something that we're already doing right now. We have partner team in each country in APAC region, and we are talking to developers, startup companies, to recruit them as our partners. We have 2,000 partners in APAC region. So basically that's something we're doing. And we also have startup foundations that help startup companies. Just not so long ago in Singapore, we sort of invested like a 20K for each startup companies as a cloud voucher for them to use our cloud services. That's something we are doing. I think that, ecosystem is the key, and that is something we're willing to invest in and continually developing. Yeah.
So I think I'll reiterate that quick plug. So you're working with over 2,000 companies now, and you have quite a number of cloud. Is that it, 2,000?
2,000 partners.
2,000
in
partners
APAC region.
in the
Yeah.
APAC region. So
right.
watch out for that, and a number of resources, cloud benefits, and things like this that the developers, especially, and the startup founders or wantrepreneurs, like, should be able to take advantage of, right? So maybe not so much for the masses just yet, but yeah, like definitely lots of opportunities to engage with the ecosystem you have at Huawei, right? Good. All right, off to you with my very complicated question, Yang. But
I always like consulting my crystal ball. I think if I were to look in the medium term, crypto has kind of been waiting for this formal regulation for quite some time. Maybe the silver lining, if we can see it that way, to disasters like this FTX, recent scandal, and a lot of the other ones that have come through, is that it puts a sense of urgency behind regulation. And I think that hopefully the industry, and I see that, especially in the Philippines industry, is strong enough to kind of work together to make sure that regulators don't punitively or over-regulate, while at the same time actually finally introducing formal frameworks that actually empower the industry more. And so I think if I had a crystal ball, that's maybe wishful thinking, but I think that's what I see for the next 3 to 5 years. There'll be a big focus.
There would be more guardrails, but at the end of the day, that would actually allow the industry to grow even more, right? Or
yes, and it maybe even would focus the industry within those guardrails to move even faster, because there won't be all these distractions of bad actors. It'll be the good ones that actually will have the regulators behind them cheering them on.
I will say, like, that is part of the, in a way, like, it's surprising for some to hear that, we're calling for regulation, but I think it's part of the values of why, open finance became a thing in the first place, right? Like, to want something of this sort, in a way. So anyway, sorry, like, I interrupted you. But yeah, so that's your crystal ball prediction. Thank you for that.
Within my crystal universe, where do I think my role will be? I like to think I'm a little bit like Web 2.5. So, you know, a champion of Web 3 that kind of sits as that double agent in a Web 2 world. So I hope that what Zendit can do is really be a great partner and friend to a lot of Web3 startups that are still a little bit lost in this rapidly evolving regulatory framework. And I think that for us, we really hope that we can be that open-minded partner that will say, hey, you don't have, you know, X qualification today, but let us try to introduce you to a partner that can get you there, or let us be that partner that can get you there, so that we can make sure that this sort of Web 2 and Web 3 world are bridged seamlessly in the future. Oh, and
The masses, your sort of
Masses. I can't
advice
forget.
to the layman.
I think in line with the first two, advice to the masses, crypto is not just retail investing. It's not just making a fortune overnight or losing 10 fortunes overnight. I think that for, you know, anyone who's kind of listening in or starting to think about crypto or Web3, I would say focus on the use cases and do your research. I think that, you know, there are a ton of resources out there to make sure that you don't lose your shirt, your home, everything in the process. There's a way to get involved in really responsible companies that are pushing out really exciting things without taking risks that are beyond you.
Very sage advice. So thank you again, Yang Yang. Thank you, Bing.
Thank you,
I hope you can
Christina.
give our ladies a round of applause. Do check out Zendit and Huawei. And of course, Philippine Startup Week. I hope everyone in the audience, as well as those watching online, learned a little bit more and kind of had to think about how fintech and Web3 can create impact in the Philippine ecosystem. Again, I've been Kat Chan. Thank you very much, and have a great rest of the Web3 Festival. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katrina Chan, Yang Yang Zhang, and Bing Zhuo for that discussion.